Hey, what's up guys? Joker here. Today is finally the day where I'm going to give you my final verdict on Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump straight into the review.
What a fear in my heart, but you're so supreme. I give my life, not for honor, but for you. In my time, there'll be no one else.
Now, if you've been watching my channel for a couple of months, then you should know that I am a big fan of the Metal Gear series, going all the way back to Metal Gear, the original just Metal Gear on the NES. I remember playing that game back on my old Nintendo Entertainment System and absolutely loving it. It was incredibly difficult, but an absolutely fantastic game. Really, really loved that, and I loved seeing the growth of the franchise over the years and seeing that story develop, and you know, all the rich characters in there, and the, you know, even through all the like the 40-minute cutscenes. I loved all of that stuff from Metal Gear Solid 5. Some of my favorite stuff from Metal Gear. It really introduced me to, you know, robust cutscenes in games and that really strong story aspect that I look for now in a lot of the titles I play, especially single-player games. I look for a very, very strong story with a compelling narrative and good cutscenes, you know, and well acted as well, which is something that's always been present in the Metal Gear Solid series. So looking at Metal Gear Solid 5, you know, there's definitely going to be two separate train of thoughts here. You know, on one hand, there's the story and then there's the gameplay. Now, in previous games, I would say that the gameplay sort of took a back seat to the amazing story that was in the game, and some of the quirky things that would happen with the mechanics of the gameplay were kind of forgiven because the story and the grand scale of it were just so epic that you could kind of forgive these little quirky things. But with Metal Gear Solid 5, I feel like they've done a complete 180 and focused more on the gameplay aspect and not so much on the cutscenes. A lot of the cutscenes I felt, you know, were kind of like missing. There were some areas where it just felt like, you know, where is there, you know, a story to this, you know, to help develop it. And most of that story is kind of hidden away in the optional cassette tapes. You know, you get cassette tapes and briefings with every mission that are kind of similar to the codex that we saw in previous Metal Gear Solid games, but if you remember, those were always kind of forced. They were wedged right in there with the story, you know, you talking back and forth with like Otacon or Zero, whoever. But in this game, it's really just all kind of optional. There are some parts that are forced, but not really that many at all. Not like previous games where you had like 1-hour dialogues with Sonny and Otacon on how to fry an egg. There is not really any of that present here in Metal Gear Solid. Most of the cassette tapes are pretty short and concise, about a minute and a half long. You know, as well as music. You can also collect music in the world that you can listen to. But, you know, I just want to get back to the story aspect. For me, was really disappointing. As a fan of the Metal Gear Solid series, I missed David Hayter in this game, but I was excited to see Kiefer Sutherland and see what he could bring to the role of Big Boss, you know, Venom Snake, as he's now called. I was excited to see what he could bring to that role. Big fan of 24 and Kiefer Sutherland, and I thought, you know, when I heard it, you know, based on the voice alone, I thought Kiefer Sutherland, if anyone had to replace David Hayter, was an excellent choice. The problem that I have with his performance in the game, or not necessarily his performance, is that there's an extreme lack of it. He doesn't really talk all that much in this game. And I don't know if, like, you know, if part of the game was, like, trimmed out, if they couldn't complete all the cutscenes they wanted to do. But there are definite parts of the game where it seems like he should be talking, and he's not. Everyone else around him is kind of talking, you know, to him, but he's not even really responding. Not even really like a, not even a grunt. He's just kind of looking off into the distance, you know, blankly, and like he's, you know, he seems like a very deep thinker. You know, Big Boss in Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain is a very, very deep thinker. He likes to think about things, not really so much of a talker, more of a listener, I would say. But in previous games, you know, you couldn't shut David Hayter up, and that's one of the things I missed about this game, was that strong dialogue between the characters, that exchange, you know, between like Ocelot and Snake. I would have liked to have seen a lot more robust character development for Snake or Big Boss. You know, that was kind of disappointing for me as a big fan of the series, but they really did focus on the gameplay this time around. It has some really strong gameplay elements, and I feel that that's going to be inviting to a lot of new fans to the series, because the gameplay in Metal Gear Solid 5 is top notch, absolutely top notch for an open world game. There's a lot to do in the open world without it ever feeling like sort of just, you know, like busy work, kind of like in, you know, the same game, a game that released on the same day as Metal Gear Solid 5, Mad Max, which I've kind of shelved. I've stopped playing that game because the whole game just feels like busy work, like, you know, just going around doing random things. Whereas in Metal Gear Solid 5, I don't feel like it's just busy work. Every mission, you know, kind of felt fresh to me. Like, some things are repeated, like, you know, oh, go extract this prisoner, or go, you know, kill this guy. You know, that kind of stuff is similar between the missions, but it always kind of felt fresh to me, and it never felt like busy work. It never felt like I was doing these things just to pad out the game and make the game last longer. I would say that element is there maybe with the scoring aspect of the missions, because you can go back and repeat previous story missions as well as side ops missions to try to get a better rank based on your score and your performance in those missions going as high as S rank. You know, there's definitely that aspect there, and there are people that are going to be completionists and want to go back and get S ranks in every mission, but that's completely optional. You know, you could just fire away and go into a base and kill everyone, you know, sight unseen, which is basically how I chose to play the game. But you could definitely approach, you know, these bases that are in the open world any way you want, because the bases are littered all throughout the open world, based whether you're in Afghanistan or in Africa, which are the two major settings in this game. So you've got a desert and a jungle environment. Both are kind of just open and empty. There's not really a whole lot going on in them, apart from these bases that are intermittent on the road there. You know, you'll come up to, maybe sometimes they're just a small base, like a patrol base or something like that, or, you know, like a checkpoint type thing. And then there's other, you know, medium-sized bases, and there's also really, really large bases, power stations. These things do actually repopulate after you clear out the enemies. It's not instant, but it does happen after, you know, if you come back like a couple hours later, it's going to be repopulated with enemies. So it's going to, you know, keep you busy, definitely with that aspect of the game. But it kind of bothered me in that sense because, you know, it made me almost feel like it was kind of Far Cry-esque in the way I was clearing bases, and you know, you come up with your iDroid and you tag enemies in the same way you did in Far Cry with your camera. You tag enemies, and then you go in, you know, stealthy or sniping, or, you know, calling in airstrikes on everyone. Well, that's not really in Far Cry, but you can call in airstrikes, and calling in airstrikes is fun. And that's, you know, something Metal Gear Solid is never short of, is just fun, and the way that you can approach these different bases and the different ways that you can clear them out. You can go in and chokehold everyone, you can go in and not kill anyone, or you could just, you know, sit back with a sniper rifle or call in airstrikes and helicopter support all you want. And that was one of the funnest things about Metal Gear Solid 5 for me, is having all of those different elements, because with those elements, it didn't really feel like a traditional Metal Gear Solid game, but it just felt like a very strong military open world game where you had so much at your disposal, you know, later on as you were leveling up and developing more things. And we'll get into the development process in just a little bit. But, you know, as you progress through the world, you get more, through the game, you get more unlocks, not just weapon unlocks and different attachments for weapons and customizations. You get that stuff too, but other things that make you definitely feel, you know, very powerful. You know, eventually you can call in support with, like, you can bring in a tank, you can call in your helicopter to come help you with a firefight. You can, you know, call in airstrike bombardments on people, smoke bombardments, you know, chafing runs. You know, you have a whole lot of options for how you could take down a base, and it's not limited to just stealth or kill everyone. You know, there's a lot of ways you can definitely go about doing the bases, and that was one of the funnest things for me, and just having a blast and being creative in the way that you went around, you know, clearing out these bases and attacking all of the different objectives throughout the world. So we can't talk about Metal Gear Solid 5 without talking about Motherbase. Now, Motherbase is basically your base of operations. You go back there between missions. You could do things there like shower, talk to, you know, different people in the world. Kind of similar to like a Mass Effect, you know, when you're back on the Normandy and you're interacting with the members of your crew. I mean, there's not that as much, you know, talking, interacting as would be in like a Mass Effect game. But there's still a fair amount of things you can do. Back at Motherbase, you can shower, which, you know, mentally and physically refreshes you. You can fuck with your troops endlessly. The troops which you've kidnapped throughout the world with your Fulton recovery device that are now in your base, and absolutely love Big Boss. There's nothing Big Boss can do wrong to these soldiers. You can go up to them, you could punch them in the face, you could slam them on the ground, you could shoot them with a tranq gun. As soon as they get up, they're just like, "Thank you, boss. Thank you, boss."
Thanks for that, boss.
So yeah, you could definitely have some fun in Motherbase, but there's also a lot of micromanagement involved in Motherbase as well. You get to develop weapons, as I mentioned earlier. You get to upgrade your weapons over time as you level up your R&D department and the other departments throughout the game. You know, you've got your intel, support, R&D, medical, you know, all of these different facets of Motherbase, you know, go towards something. So if you level up your R&D department, you know, you're going to be able to develop more weapons quickly. If you upgrade your support, you're going to be able to get better support, obviously. Medical staff, you know, better medical support for your staff. You know, there is a point in the game where you actually do need a pretty strong medical staff. I'm not going to go into any spoilers, but it helps to have, you know, those different facets of Motherbase upgraded so that you can, you know, keep going and having more fun throughout the world, because you want to unlock, you know, as many items as you can and have them all at your disposal when you're out there, you know, messing with people. So you want to keep, you know, make sure you are paying attention to Motherbase. You know, it's not something you could just forget about and, you know, just leave it there. You know, there's definitely that, it's definitely a strong part of Metal Gear Solid 5. You know, you really got your open world, you know, combat and going around doing what you want, but then you've also got that micromanagement of Motherbase, which added a lot to the game for me personally. I really enjoyed most of the aspects in there. There was the FOB missions, which honestly, you could really take or leave. This is the multiplayer aspect that I talked about prior to release, where there was, you know, reports from GameSpot initially that there was a paywall for the FOB missions, which I reported on, which was later found out to be false information. The way that it actually works is you get your first FOB for free, your forward operating base for free, which sort of serves as an extension to Motherbase that you can then have in these online missions where other players can try to come on to your FOB and try to attack you and take some of your resources, and vice versa. You can go attack other random players as well and try to take their resources, and they could build up their defenses to defend against you. You could build up things like nuclear deterrence, which, you know, makes it much more difficult with taking the bases. So, you know, but I really found the FOB to be kind of an afterthought and pretty weak, and you could definitely play this game without ever having to focus on the FOB. But there is that aspect of the payment in there. There are microtransactions built into the FOB mode. Basically, after you get your first FOB base, you will start to get you know, Motherbase coins or tokens or whatever like that that you could use to unlock more bases and more things for your base. But right away they say, you know, if you want to get a second base, a third base, you know, you can pay X amount of coins right here in the game to buy, you know, different FOB upgrades for your bases. And that right there just put me off right away, because if you're paying $60 for a game, and, you know, the cheapest I've seen this game around is like $50, so it's pretty pricey still at this point, even a couple weeks after release on the PC, because it is a good game. These good games like this, they tend to stay, you know, the price tends to stay up for a little bit longer on better titles. So, you know, the fact that you're paying $60 for a game, or nearly $60 for a game, and then you're being prompted at some point, you know, to pay to unlock more bases is just really discouraging to me. Even though you can go ahead and unlock those Motherbase tokens on your own, I just feel like that element doesn't need to be there, and it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth about that aspect. It doesn't ruin the entire game for me. You know, I'm not going to be over dramatic about it, but it's there, and it definitely bothers me. And if I were to give a score to this game, that would definitely take a point off the top just for its inclusion in the game. Alright, so when you're out in the world, you don't have to go at everything completely by yourself. You can bring your horse with you, which you start out the game with, D-Horse. You could also have the option to recruit Quiet to come and work for you, who's a really badass sniper who will just kind of sit back and pick enemies off for you, as well as spot enemies throughout the world for you to help you out a little bit, so you can bring her along on missions. My favorite buddy, though, without a doubt, was D-Walker, which is a small bipedal robot, kind of like in the vein of Metal Gear, but, you know, on a very small scale, a bipedal robot that you can ride around in. You know, you can upgrade D-Walker, you can put things like an autoloader on him, you know, bigger Gatling guns, rocket launchers. You know, he's really powerful. You can definitely go through bases and seriously mess shit up with D-Walker, just riding around on his back and just mowing people down with your Gatling gun. It's an absolute blast using him. The handling on D-Walker is a whole nother question. I mean, that if you're just burning along and you just try holding down S to stop, he just doesn't, like, stop for, like, a mile. It's a good long ways. You basically to stop, you would have to, like, press C or just jump off. Those were, like, the easiest ways to get off. The C is kind of, like, for changing positions. You can go from, like, a sprint mode where he's, like, rolling along to a mode where he's actually walking on the legs, and you could switch between those. So there's a way you can stop it by just hitting C. But the handling on this thing is all over the place, especially if you're in that sort of, like, sprinting, that rolling mode. He is literally all over the place when you're trying to control him. But that didn't stop me from enjoying using him, because, you know, you can go into combat and get into some serious shit, and you could just go ahead and hold your Q key and press 2 and then whistle him over. He just comes over like... He just comes over, just come on, hooty-hoo, hooty-hoo. He just comes right on over. You could do that with your horse as well, but he's not really as effective in combat as D. Walker. So yeah, I preferred to roll with D. Walker because I found him to be the most useful to me. But there's, you know, definitely the aspect you could use Quiet as well. So, you know, it's going to be your playstyle. That's just another aspect of the gameplay that you have control over. You could say, oh, I don't want to, you know, use D. Walker. I want to use Quiet because I like her. I think she's cool. Even if she is a completely over-sexualized female for absolutely no reason. Like, I don't know why that had to be. Like, I understand Kojima is Kojima, and he's kind of weird at times, and we love him because he's weird, but some of the moments with Quiet were just really awkward. Like, you know, the storyline as to why she's like almost completely naked or in the buff, it's because she breathes through her skin. So yeah, it's kind of weird that she is completely naked when later on in the game you can unlock clothes for her. So it was just kind of a head scratcher as to why Kojima felt the need to have this character, you know, rolling around, you know, almost completely in the buff. To play MGS5 is to Fulton. And you could Fulton if you want to. You could Fulton till the end of time. No, but seriously, to play Metal Gear Solid 5 really is to Fulton, and you're definitely going to go through that phase early on when you're using the Fulton. When you have that realization that you can Fulton anything. You can Fulton weapon emplacements, tanks, jeeps, animals, you know, any animals, you know, bears, fucking birds, anything, dogs. You can Fulton anything, soldiers. And everything you Fulton goes back to Motherbase and becomes yours to use at a later date. If you Fulton a tank, later on you can call that tank in to come into combat, and you can drive that tank and kill shit with that tank. So definitely Fulton, definitely upgrade your Fulton, because there was actually a point where I did get to a mission fairly early on in the game where I was being required to Fulton out a full-size truck, and I wasn't able to do so until I had upgraded my Fulton to the next tier. So I actually had to back out of that mission, you know, upgrade my R&D department, do a couple side missions, which, you know, sidetracked me for about an hour and a half, and then I was able to go back and do the mission. And I really liked that aspect there, because I was going to the mission, I was, you know, kind of scratching my head. I was like, I don't know what to do here. And I was like, oh, I got to upgrade my Fulton, and then I'll actually be able to do this mission. And I wound up having to upgrade D. Walker as well, because I was having some pretty heavy combat with these opponents in the game called the Skulls. These, like, zombie-like creatures that jump all over the place. They're pretty OP. So I recommend using the D. Walker against the Skulls, definitely. But yeah, I love the Fulton aspect of the game. It's so much fun, you know. It's fun pretty much throughout the entire game, just watching things sail up into the sky. But yeah, that's really all I got for you. Metal Gear Solid 5 is a strong recommendation from me, even if you're not you know, have been a previous fan of the series of Metal Gear and you're just looking to get into a game for the first time. This game is still worth playing for the amazing open world gameplay that they have presented here, all of that awesome military gameplay and the micromanagement of Motherbase, and everything just comes together cohesively to give a really stellar performance and one of the best games of this year. It's probably number 2 on my list for this year, right after The Witcher 3. But then again, I haven't completed The Witcher 3, and I have completed Metal Gear Solid 5 now, so yeah. But Metal Gear Solid 5 is awesome. It took me about 50 hours to complete it, and that was doing about 90% of the side ops missions. So there's definitely more there you could do if you wanted to get 100% completion. You could definitely do that, and there'll be more hours you can get out of this game, probably a good 50 to 100 hours if you're a true completionist. But I'm very satisfied with my 50-hour experience that I got. You know, it's $60. You know, you can pick it up for like 50 to 55 on G2A right now, but it's a strong recommendation from me, even at that price. And if you can wait a little while and get it on sale down the road, you know, that's even better, you know, for your pocket, because this game is just worth playing for pretty much everyone. But there are maybe some hardcore fans of the series that I understand are going to be disappointed by Metal Gear Solid 5. and the lack of a really strong story like we did have in previous games. I'm definitely one of those people that was disappointed in the story aspect, and initially my gut-wrench reaction was just like, I don't like this because Snake isn't talking and there's no story, but then I got so overwhelmed by how good the open world aspect of this game was that I stopped caring because it was just having absolute pure fun. So that's why Metal Gear Solid 5 gets a very strong recommendation from me. I don't believe in giving scores. All I can tell you is this game is worth playing. You know, no matter if you're a fan of the series or not, play MGS5 at some point, please. But I'm going to go ahead and get out of here now, guys. Please let me know what you thought about the review down below, or if you've been playing Metal Gear Solid 5 and what your thoughts are, if you agree with me or not. I would love to read those comments. And I'm going to get out of here, so I'll catch you guys next time. Ta-ra.